morning crust. It's a great day to be a bread brother.
Ugh, mornings are not my jam. Or jelly.
Oh, come on. Stop loafing around.
I just woke up feeling hollow inside.
Psst, just grab one of the new Morning Uncrustables sandwiches, like Bright-Eyed Berry or Up and Apple, filled with 12 grams of protein and tons of deliciousness. Crust, what are you eating?
It's just granola, not even yogurt.
No crust, no fuss. Uncrust your mornings.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 134 of DBR Bites, Duke Basketball Roundup. Donald here. Scott Rich is still with us. In full disclosure, we're recording this just minutes after the recap for the Cal game because, of course, we are playing the Stanford Cardinal on Saturday, and we want to make sure that we got everything recorded on Jason's birthday. It's still Jason's birthday, but you're going to be listening to this on Friday, so continue to send Jason your well wishes as he has fun in Africa.
I get time and a half, bonus points for working on Jason's birthday, right? I think that's how it works.
I'm pretty sure it's a holiday. I think we both get double time. We'll talk to Jason about it when he gets back. But anyway, let's talk about the Stanford Cardinal. Again, Duke is on this West Coast trip, and as I mentioned in the Cal preview, no team, with the exception of Wake Forest last year, has gone out to the West Coast on this 2-game slate and won both games. We've won one. We have an opportunity to get the second win against Stanford. That game on Saturday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time on ACC Network. I will let you know right now that UNC and Cal are playing at 4 o'clock on ACC Network. So make sure, as we had to the other night during ACC After Dark, make sure your ACC Network Extra is on standby. So make sure you have your computer or your phone ready to go just in case that game runs long. Let's talk about the Stanford Cardinal, what they've done so far this year. They're 14-4. Pretty solid season on their part. 3-2 in the ACC. They have some pretty key top 100 wins against Minnesota, St. Louis, Colorado, and then in conference against Louisville, Virginia Tech. And we'll talk very quickly about their win against UNC on Wednesday night. They do have 4 losses. 2 of them, I would say, are on the bad end. Seattle and UNLV. Seattle 121 in KenPom, UNLV 148th. But they have 2 in-conference losses against Notre Dame and Virginia. Both of those, I think, are pretty decent ones. We go back, they're 71st in KenPom, 63rd in Torvik, 76th in Evan Mia, and 65th in the net. So this is a quad 1 game, a quad 1 road game, but it's going to be against a team who's coming off of the high of beating UNC 95-90, coming back. It was kind of a back and forth game, but we'll talk about this man right here. Know this name, Ibuka Okori. He had 36 points in that game, but Stanford was able to hold off UNC, and being able to watch that game before watching ours, it gave us kind of an insight as to what Stanford is going to try to do to limit some of the star power that Duke possesses on their home floor. We'll also hear from Kyle Smith, as I mentioned on a couple episodes ago on the ACC Weekly Presser. I got a chance to ask Kyle Smith some questions, the Stanford coach. We'll hear from him a little bit. But Scott, let's get into the metrics. What do you see from this team? And then we'll kind of cross-reference it with what we see from the eye test.
Well, this is a team that, just seems rock solid across the board. They're 90th offensively in efficiency, 62nd defensively. They're about middle of the pack in speed. They average both offensively and defensively about 17 seconds per possession. Again, that's right around the average. There are a couple of things that they excel at. One, they are very aggressive defensively. They have the second highest steal percentage in the nation. They are going to put pressure on ball handlers. They are going to try to force turnovers and try to get points off of steal. They are also very aggressive on the offensive end, and particularly that manifests in getting to the line. They're one of the top 40 teams in the country at getting to the free throw line. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy, though, because despite how much they get to the free throw line, they are not a great two-point shooting team. They get a vast majority of their offense either from beyond the arc or from the free throw line. So they're a team that is going to attack you and is going to try to draw fouls, but isn't particularly adept at making hard 2-point shots if they aren't getting fouled. That's something that I have to imagine is something that is very, very key on the scouting report. And maybe that's changed a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about, what happened against UNC and some of those stellar efforts. The last thing that jumps out is that they are, again, they're a bit of an enigma in that they are one of the youngest teams in the country in terms of Ken Palm's experience metric, but they simultaneously return about 40% of the minutes that they had last year. So this is a team that, is an outlier in this era of college basketball, that is a young team that at least seems to be trying to grow together, which is something that we very rarely see in the transfer portal era.
I think the one thing also is you mentioned, going back to a couple things on defense, their tempo, as you mentioned, throughout the course of the season has been middle of the pack. But since they've been in the ACC, their tempo is dead last on defense. They want people to slow down, and that's going to be part of their thing, is that as they look for steals, as they look for some of these turnovers, they're going to want to slow the game down on defense. And they're not necessarily going to run fast on offense. They want this game to have a pace where the guy with the ball last wins type of deal, where there's not going to be a lot of runs and swings in this game. That's their hope. And one thing that they do that has been very, very bad for them is something that I was able to ask Hal Smith, their head coach, about what they've learned so far during the ACC portion of the season. And this was before their win last night against UNC. They were coming off the trip to Virginia to play Virginia Tech. So first of all, listen to what Kyle Smith had to say about his assessment of this team so far in the ACC. And there's one glaring thing that I want you to focus in on. Here it is.
That's a great question. We're 2-2. I think there's a little bit of a adjustment going in the ACC. We've on the glass, we've been these teams have kind of exposed us a little bit. We did a little better job against Virginia, but they're an elite rebounding team. But I like the way we've competed in all 4 games. As far as we've had 3 halves of not very efficient offensive basketball, so we got to keep it. But I think there's some going on the road, playing really good environments, really good teams, gave us some experience because 2 of our best talents are obvious. They're freshmen, and put them in, and they competed well. Not to say competed perfectly, but competed well. And I think that's the first step. And I just think the more exposure we get to those environments, those games, and playing at home, and the Louisville game was a great opportunity for us to, great win for us, but also just felt good about, like, hey, we can compete with these guys. And I felt the same thing out in Virginia too, that we're there, and hopefully we can our teams usually get better as the season goes on. And I hope that's the case this year.
All right. So the thing that I got from that, Scott, is that he mentioned that teams have exposed them on the glass, and boy, have they. They are the worst offensive rebounding team in the ACC so far. And they also allow more offensive rebounds than anybody in the ACC. And I think the one place you're entering, thankfully, we're entering a spot where Duke is the number 1 team for offensive rebounds. We're getting close to 40% of our offensive rebounds. They're allowing close to 40% of our offensive rebounds. We should marry those 2 stats. We should let that happen on Saturday night. But I think it's about getting inside, getting defense. And you mentioned the fact that their effective field goal percentage is like not great because they take more threes than they do twos. They go to the free throw line and they try to get their points that way. But inside, they are just missing a ton of shots. Our inside game has to be on point. And again, I think on both offense and defense, we should control the paint. And that's where we're going to get, hopefully, a lot of our points against Stanford.
And it bears mentioning, as we, segue into talking about the players after the break, that there's a decent shot that Stanford will be missing one of their best rebounders in this game on Saturday. Chezoma Okpara missed the game against UNC. So this is a team that has not rebounded well. They've actually been sort of bouncing back and forth in various starting lineups amongst their bigs to, I think, try to address that. They haven't yet, and they may be missing one of their major tools to address that need if Chisholm Akpara isn't able to get back to 100% and play on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we have not seen the availability report for Saturday yet. That won't come out until later on Friday. But yeah, it did not seem likely that Okpara was going to be either playing or if he does play, to be 100% on Saturday. But again, we're going to pause right here. We're going to talk about the players on the other side of the break, the things to watch. And as I mentioned, the transfer portal gets a well-needed makeover. We're going to talk about what it means for Duke and for the rest of college basketball after this.
Support for Fans First Sports Network comes from Big Fork Brands, bringing bold bacon sausage, paleo pork jerky, and Chicago-style sauces to your table. Enjoy rich, smoky flavors made with sustainable ingredients and chef-crafted care. Big Fork uses 100% heritage hogs raised outdoors without antibiotics and has been featured by Food and Wine, the Chicago Tribune, and QVC for their bold flavors. Listeners visit bigforkbrands.com and receive 20% off at checkout using promo code FFSN. Bigforkbrands.com, promo code FFSN. Thank you for your support of this show.
All right, we are back. We continue our preview of the Stanford Cardinal. And Scott, I turn to you for the players. And you mentioned this before the break, but I want to kind of reiterate. This team is one where, unlike most of college basketball, they have only one main transfer in the rotation. Everyone else is either a freshman or has been at Stanford for multiple years. And as you've mentioned before, they kind of have tried to grow some sort of continuity with this group. So talk about some of the players to watch. And I'm just going to lead you with this. Abuka Okori. Talk about this guy first, because he's really good.
Yeah, Abuka Okori is a very good basketball player. Let's just start there. It's 36 points against UNC. What's fascinating about him is that on a team that scores a lot of points from three, he is not a great three-point shooter. He is getting his offense the old-fashioned way. He did that against UNC. Of his 36 points, he got to the line 11 times. He was 9 of 15 from two. He's a 6'2 guy, so he's the type of guy who's going to try to beat you off the dribble and attack the rim and try to finish through, around, or over your bigs. He does shoot a lot of threes, but doesn't make a lot of threes. He's shooting 32% from deep on high volume. So there is a scouting report on him, which is you'll give him the deep shot rather than let him attack the rim. You have to wonder if he might get, the quasi-Elliot Cadeau treatment from John Shire. He's a high assist, low turnover guy. He's just, a great all-around point guard. Everything you would want from your point guard, minus that shooting from deep. So it would not surprise me. We've now seen multiple games in a row that Dame Sarr is that, hey, we've got a 6'7" utility, Swiss Army knife, and you don't, that we can put on your best player. It wouldn't surprise me if the game plan revolves around Dame Sarr taking out Abuka Okori. And if Dame Sarr is able to take out Abuka Okori, there really is a question of who is that secondary scorer. Chisholm Akpara had been the secondary scorer for much of this season, but again, he did not play against UNC. It sounds questionable at best if he's going to be able to turn it around for the Duke game. And if he doesn't, what Stanford puts onto the floor is a lot of three-point specialists. A lot of three-point specialists who are quite good at their jobs, but don't really have a lot outside of that. Ryan Agarwal was one. He's been at Stanford all 4 years, a rarity. You always like to shout that out when you see that happening nowadays. He's a very low usage guy, but he takes a lot. He takes his threes and he makes them. He shoots at a 41% clip. Most of Stanford's bigs are of the quasi-stretch variety. They're going to have multiple guys on the floor at every point in time who can make a bunch of threes, including a guy who probably broke a lot of UNC hearts in terms of who the heck is this guy, Jeremy Dent-Smith. Jeremy Dent-Smith is a guy who's been playing off the bench this entire year. He's a 6'1 grad student coming up from the D2 ranks. He played at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and he just scored 20 points against UNC, going an absurd 6 of 7 from deep. You have to imagine that UNC fans were not expecting Jeremy Dent-Smith to be the one who stuck the dagger in to finish up that upset. So again, this is a team without Chisholm Akpara. There really is a question of where is the rebounding going to come from? This is a Stanford team that, as great as they were against UNC, without Chisholm Akpara, there really are questions about who does run the offense outside of Ibuka Okore, because there are a lot of nice pieces around him, but they're all one-note pieces. And if Duke can shut down Ibuka Okore, because Duke has Adame Sarr, and not a lot of teams do, who else is going to beat Duke on the offensive end of the floor? That is the question that Stanford's going to have to answer.
Yeah, and I think the one thing is, sure, they have the continuity, but like you mentioned, they don't really have a ton of size, right? Aiden Cameron, 6'10", Oscar Giltey, 6'10", Chisholm Okpara, if he does play, is 6'8", and then AJ Rahosi is 6'9". Like, other than that, they have a lot of guys, like their guards are 6'1", 6'2". They have those wings that are like 6'5", 6'6", and then they really don't have a lot of guys who play big. Even one of their bigs is just like a guy who just like to sit outside and shoot some threes. So it's going to be interesting to see how defensively they match up with Duke, and namely, of course, with Cam Boozer and even Pat Gongba. Like, I want to see how that works, but I'm curious with Stanford if the high of beating UNC can be sustained. Are they going to come out hot? And sometimes that happens, right? It happens for us. We'll have a team where they come out hot against us, and then they, lose, and then it just affects them in the dumps the next time. We've had teams that have beaten us and had that high, and then their next game they just lay a dud, and it makes us angry that we lost to them in the first place. I'm wondering if they come out with that high and that intensity. And for us, our defense was there against Cal. I expected to be there against Stanford, but can the intensity join it? Can the sense of urgency join it?
And again, it bears repeating that as Stanford beat UNC on the heels of some best games of their lives from
Right.
role players, right? Ibuka Okore is going to play well against us, right? Ibuka Okore is probably going to get 15, 20 points, even if we play some great defense. But Ryan Agarwal going 5 of 9 from deep and scoring 20 points, that's probably not happening again unless the star is really shining. Jeremy Dent Smith going 6 of 7 from 3, especially as a 6'1" guard who's going to have trouble against our larger guards. UNC does put some smaller guards on the floor, giving him a little bit more space. I don't think he's going 6 of 7 from 3 against us. If I had to put some money on something, I might put some money on that. So that's the question that Stanford's going to have to answer is, can they keep up with Duke? Can they keep up with Duke's size if they aren't having some otherworldly performances from their role players?
So that actually leads me into the things to watch, because that's kind of an ancillary thing that you mentioned, that perimeter defense. I just said in general, tough-nosed defense. I think it's one thing to stop Ibuka Okore, but as we mentioned, you don't want the other guys to beat you either. You don't want anyone to have career days. And even if it's just one person, that's enough on the road to get the home fans riled up and to, again, give them that hope that momentum can carry them over the finish line for another major upset. Again, it's super difficult to go out to the West Coast so far in this new ACC and beat both teams, but that's what we have to do. And that intensity and that sense of urgency of being the second team to do it and the first one this season, that has to be palpable from the start, and it starts with the defense. Rebounding, I think, is our biggest asset here. We're tops in offensive rebounding in the ACC. They're dead last in defensive rebounding in the ACC. Like Kyle Smith said, other teams have exploited them in that department. We should help continue that trend. That should be something where we have an advantage. Getting into the paint, getting rebounds, and even if we're missing shots, getting those offensive rebounds. I hope our offensive rebounding is low because we're making a ton of shots. But if we miss shots, we need to be right there to get the putbacks and get to the line and make your free throws. The last thing I have is just shooting and ball movement. One thing that Stanford does do well is they limit shots off of the pass. They're very good at making you have to go one-on-one. And they want guys to kind of get into that realm where they can go and steal the ball. But one thing that we have is we're able to work the ball inside like we did in the second half against Cal. If we can take over the paint, I think, again, that's going to be a major advantage. Working the ball inside, being ready to score off pass, having guys on the wings and in the corners with their hands up ready to catch a ball, even if someone's crashing, going through the lane and driving the lane, being ready to see that kick out and maybe do a swing around to get a good shot. This is going to be an advantage or inside game, playing inside outside. And if we're able to do that, I think Stanford's going to have a hell of a time trying to fix that and trying to limit what Cam and what Pat can do. And even guys like Caleb Foster and Nick Kamina getting to the rack and finishing through contact. That's what they need to continue to do. And hopefully against Stanford, they'll be able to do that.
I think there is one benefit to this trip is there are some similarities between how this Duke team prepares for both Cal and Stanford. I think that John Shire can roll out a similar defensive game plan as he did against Day Abrams to do that against Abuka Okori. I don't think you're going to slow down Abuka Okori because he's a better player quite as much. But I think that John Shire can translate that game plan, not have to institute an entirely different plan on a quick turnaround when you're on the road on the West Coast. I think that's something that will benefit Duke. And again, as you mentioned, this is a team that's weaknesses do seem to be Duke's strengths. And Duke as a team has struggled sometimes to really hammer that home. We saw we saw some steps forward on that against Cal, where Cam Boozer and Pat Gongba were taking advantage of their size in the paint. This is another game to do that. This is another game where Cam Boozer should be taking 10, 15 shots from the paint, not 5, 10 shots from deep. Pat Gongba should be getting the ball, and he should have 6, 7 shots. He shouldn't be settling for for open threes. He shouldn't be settling for being a facilitator. Duke needs to translate the good that it did against Cal a few miles down the road to Stanford, and that should be able to translate, and that should be the same recipe for a Duke win.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the part where you mentioned that that really resonates is the fact that we sometimes know these strengths and we don't take advantage of them. This is a game where we should try to take advantage of those strengths that we do have, because I think that will be the major difference in this, and having a second half where we get a good lead and then able to make it into a big lead and never look back. This is going to be one where hopefully we're emerging from the West Coast unscathed. Again, the first team to be able to do that, have the opportunity to do that this season and actually follow through on it. We got to be tenacious inside, and I think we got to be tenacious with the rebounding, because I think those are strengths that will overwhelm Stanford and what they're trying to do. Again, that game, Saturday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on ACC Network. We will be back at some point after the game, not Saturday night, but on Sunday to recap that. Get your headlines in, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Before we get out of here, I did want to mention a new change to the college basketball transfer portal. I think, dare I say this? Don't think this is something that's going to become a trend. I think the NCAA finally did something right. They have changed the transfer portal for men's basketball, women's basketball, and men's hockey. The big thing about this is, instead of having a 60-day window that opens sometime in March for all of those sports, there will now be a 15-day window. But that window will not open until the day after the national championship game for those sports. So for this year, for men's basketball, that means the transfer portal, instead of opening in after the first round of the NCAA tournament, it now opens on April 7th, which is the day after the national championship. It will run through April 21st. For women's basketball, because their national championship is the day before the men, they open up on April 6th. It will close on April 20th. Another change that they have done, which kind of falls in line with what they have done this year in college football. If there's a head coaching change at a school, a 15-day portal window will open for players from that school 5 days after the new coach is hired. But if no coach has been hired within 30 days and the transfer portal is closed at that 30-day point, a 15-day window will open for those players on the 31st day for players from that school and that school only. So, Scott, I think, finally the NCAA has done something right. I think we're all hoping they do the same for college football. But talk to me what you think about the new transfer portal. It takes effect immediately, so there's no waiting until next year. We don't have to worry about the transfer portal, and neither does anybody else in college basketball, until after the national championship is done on April 6th.
When when this news came across, I was reminded of a joke from one of my favorite stand-up comedians who's basically talking about how their significant other wanted some praise for not cheating on them. And the
Hmm.
response was, that's the bare minimum that I expect. You don't get points for that. And that's what this feels like. Like, this is the most obvious duh change that why wasn't this the case in the first place? Why have we gotten to the point where we're giving the NCAA flowers for making the change and doing the absolute barest minimum that we should be expecting for them as a functioning governing organization? But we are at that point. This is the right move. This is something that's going to benefit the sport. Because during the NCAA tournament, we should not be talking about who's transferring where. We should be talking about the games. And that was something that was missing. Part of the conversation during the Final Four was who's already in the portal or who's going to be in the portal, which is ridiculous. The other thing that popped into my mind when this came up was a bit of an unfortunate reality of this had happened last year. Would Jay Lucas have been with the team for the entire run? The
Hmm.
answer is probably yes. And that's a little bit of a painful, oh, what if scenario for Duke fans to have to live through. The NCAA might have done the right thing, but from a Duke fan's perspective, it was certainly a year too late.
I was gonna say that this is closing the question of will a coach be forced to leave in the middle of a season to go take over another program because the transfer portal opens during the season, during the postseason. And that's same thing for football, right? If you think about the Lane Kiffin situation and that whole fiasco between Ole Miss and LSU and who was coaching where for what, how long, that was a situation that didn't have to happen. They could have just opened the portal after the season was done and or at least figured out some way to make the season end before the portal opens and everyone would be happy and everyone would be able to stay where they needed to be for the duration of their entire season. Now that's going to be something that happens. Now I will say this, I will push back on the sense that we are going to still hear about some players entering the portal during Final Four weekend. It's the biggest weekend of the year, other than the first weekend of the tournament. The Final Four weekend is going to be one where guys are going to probably put their name out there just so they get the maximum coverage and the maximum eyeballs on the fact that they're in the portal and that they're available. But I think the great thing is that no player will enter the portal until after that is done, and you won't have a situation where guys feel like they need to leave before their season is done because they want to enter the portal and get somewhere else. And I think also for college basketball and for men's, like they're in the middle of the second semester when the Final Four is played. It's not at the end of a semester like it is in football. So there's no reason to leave early. Like they can now stay, make their decisions, finish out their classes, and then they can go and be a part of their new team for summer practices and summer workouts. So again, I think as you mentioned, this is something they should have been done a long time ago. To borrow from your analogy, this is like me, when I was a kid making in my bed in the morning and asking for ice cream. You made your bed. You're supposed to make your bed every day. So that is what the NCAA is doing. I will say they got something right, but we're not going to give them too much credit for it.
It is worth mentioning, the this isn't all sunshine and roses because despite the changes in college football, which this year, which was a step in the right direction, players were still announcing their intention to enter the portal before the
Mhm.
portal was officially open. And once that happens, you know that their agents were getting calls and it was back channels, et cetera, et cetera. The things that aren't supposed to happen, but we know do as part of this era. So this is not going to cure those problems. This is not going to prevent tampering. Like you said, there are still some players who are going to announce their intention to enter the portal, even though the portal doesn't technically open. So it is not as big of a win as I think we would like it to be. But we're at this point now where anytime the NCAA does something baseline competent, we have to give them a round of applause so they can continue to be basically competent because otherwise they're going to continue to do silly stuff that ruins the game we love.
we just had this whole analogy about not getting treats for doing the things we're supposed to be doing, and now you're saying we should give them treats for doing what they should be doing.
We might have to. I mean, they're really they've cheated on us a hell of a lot of times, Donald.
Yeah, it's true.
We have to do something.
No ice cream for the NCAA. Do your jobs and we'll be fine.
We've
we
mixed
won't
like
complain.
5 different metaphors and jokes at this point.
My
I'm
treat
not
to
sure
them,
what makes sense.
My treat to them is that I won't complain about them as much if they keep doing the right things. So I feel like that's a treat for them to enjoy. So we will leave that, and we will leave it on this episode of DBR Bites. Again, we're going to be back after the Stanford game. Get your headlines in dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back at some point this weekend. It's going to be a holiday weekend. So, and then after this game, we have a nice week break, at least of games. So who knows what can happen on the DBR podcast when there's no games. You leave us with idle time. We come up with things to do. But he is Scott. I'm Donald. For Jason, it's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.